Hello and welcome back to another episode of J-Pod, Jefferson School District's very own podcast. I'm your host, Superintendent Brad Kapner, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Chris Shaw and Becca Mallory. Good morning, guys. How are you today?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wide awake and ready to go.
That's what I like to hear, yes. Off to another great week and another good time in another good year for Jefferson School District. Our podcast is designed to strengthen the connection between our community and our schools. And we talk about events coming up. We describe programs so you are well aware of how they function. And we interview students and teachers regarding various topics. Since August, we talked about our back-to-school event. We interviewed our Nutrition Services Director, Sharon Short, on everything related to food in the district. And today, our topic is our Alternative Pathway program. This is a new program for us. We used to offer an alternative school years ago, but there hasn't been anything in the 5+ years since I've been superintendent. So we're thrilled to finally offer this to our community, and today is about giving you all the details so you know everything about it. Who it's for, how you enroll, etc. And we are joined today by our special guest, Laura Pierce-Cummings, principal of the high school. Good morning and welcome, Laura.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in. We have a lot to kind of cover here. And when it comes to alternative pathway, I think there's some confusion about what that means exactly, right? So how would you describe an alternative pathway? Who's that for?
So an alternative pathway is another way to graduation. So we have created a program that gives students a different option to the traditional high school model.
Okay, good. So, Mike, who would qualify for something like that?
So our high school students, grades 9 through 12.
So it's a high school program.
It is a high school program.
Okay. And the middle school, they have something similar. They don't have necessarily an alternative pathway, but they do have an online way of going as well, right? My understanding.
Yes, because similarly to high school students, we have middle school students who also want a different option. Mm-hmm. And so the middle school has an online option for their students as well.
Yeah, and I would encourage, if families that have middle school students and they're interested or want to know more about that, they can call the middle school and talk to the principal there, Scott Jancy, and be happy to answer your questions. Today, though, is really just focused on our high school pathway. And, for high school, it becomes a little bit more serious because there's credits for graduation, and where you don't have that at the middle school level. And so we have to make sure that kids are on track to graduate. And there are different scenarios. Not everybody fits into the same path, right? The same way of going. And there's different reasons for taking an alternative pathway.
So I keep hearing that alternative path. So what exactly does that mean? Is it like online, or is this at the school? What exactly is an alternative path mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Laura, how does it look?
So the goal of the program is to fit the student's need. And so we have different options, but it's really going to depend on the student. So we have our fully online option. Students can stay at home and work on classes online, meet with a Jefferson High School teacher via Google Meet, but they are at home by their choice. The other option is what we're calling hybrid, and that one is really interesting because this is where it's fine-tuned to the student. We have students who want to come in for 1 or 2 classes in the high school and then come on over to the Pathways classroom and do some online work. We have students who want to come into the high school for a couple of classes, but then go home and finish up online classes. And then we have the students who want to take a couple of classes in the high school, but also come into our Alternative Pathways classroom to do the online work.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So we have, what I'm hearing you say is you can do this all online if you want.
Yes.
Or you can do a hybrid where you're coming into a classroom. And is this in the high school, this classroom?
So the Alternative Pathways classroom is a classroom that's located by our district office. We just furnished it with all kinds of flexible furniture, if you will. So we're trying to meet students' needs who want something different than a traditional classroom. And we have a teacher, Doug Noggle, who will be supporting students as they are working on their online classes.
Okay, so how is that set up? So if let's say I want to do an online hybrid, right? So I'm going to be, do I get to determine that as a student? Say, well, for 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to be online, and on Wednesday, I'm going to come into from 8 to 10 o'clock. I'm going to do that, or how is this organized, and who organizes it or helps the student put their schedule together?
So there's a few key people. First is the student that wants to do the program. Second, the parent or guardian to support and understanding what the program is. And then the Jefferson High School staff. And so we have a few absolutes if you want to join the program. First, you have to be willing to have an online meeting with Mr. Noggle each week to check in for progress.
Okay, that's good.
You also have to be willing to be part of an Alternative Pathways Lions Pride class, which is our advisory period that meets the other graduation requirements beyond high school classes. And it's a way of building community because we know that being social in high school is really important and we want to keep you connected. And then it's working as a team with our high school counselor, Holly Ron, to develop a schedule. And so that's the other requirement. Students have to develop a schedule, turn it in to Mr. Noggle and Ms. Ron. We can always change it, and that's why we have our check-ins, but you are full-time students, and so we need you to have a schedule and keep to it.
Right. So if a parent is interested in this, they would maybe reach out to the counselor and email or call the counselor and say, hey, my child might be interested in doing this, or should the student go to the counselor? What's the best way to initiate this?
So we're in summer right now, so the best way is to call the high school, say that you're interested in Alternative Pathways, and you'll speak with me or with Miss Ron, our counselor. During the school year, if this were to come up, it would be to go to Miss Ron, our counselor, and talk about the option of it. Remember, we are dealing with high school credits, and so timing is really important because we don't want students losing credit as they're switching from one in-person to online.
Okay, so that's kind of a good question, right? Because there's a timeline. So I don't necessarily come to you in late November and say I want to go online, right? It's because there's credits, and so the best thing to do if you're interested would be to start as early as you could in the fall.
Yes. We don't want students to start classes in person and then all of a sudden just stop, because then you don't get an opportunity to earn your credits. However, again, this is an individualized program, so starting with your counselor and then scheduling a meeting with our parents and guardian and student would be the next step, and then determining what would be the best path forward. Because again, the goal is graduation. We just want to make sure that our students have the skills and the experiences so that they can graduate and move beyond high school.
Yeah.
And these students are Jefferson High School students. So even though they're on the alternative pathways, they are still counted as Jefferson High School kids.
Excellent question. And that's the first thing that comes up. And it's also in our program guide that's on the website. Yes, alternative pathway students are Jefferson High School students.
That's awesome.
To the degree that they follow our student handbook. They have a Jefferson High School counselor, they have a Jefferson High School principal, and a Jefferson High School teacher who is supporting their online learning. They can attend extracurricular activities. They will walk at graduation. So definitely part of our community.
Part of the family, just a little bit different style of learning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Can they do sports as well?
Yep. Sports, dances, prom. They can come in for assemblies if they would like. And that's part of that Lions Pride Advisory class. Mr. Noggle will keep students up to date on what's happening in school, in addition to those graduation requirements that are not in the classroom.
So that's really, really good. I think this is something that's really needed. But, my experience, like when I first started teaching, I taught an alternative program. And in addition, I did it in the evenings, in addition to my day job as a teacher. And what I found the challenging part was sometimes the students were doing these packets, and they would never turn in their work. And so really, I was like signing off on an education, but they weren't really doing anything, right? And so it was really hard because they weren't really learning necessarily. So how is this, like, how do we, what kind of a student would really be successful in this scenario? And how can we manage so that we can make sure that you talked about Doug Noggle, the teacher, checking in with them weekly, right? So, but how is it going to function, and what kind of a kid should we be looking at?
Sure. So we put everything into that. Our whole goal is to ensure that our students are prepared for post-high school. And so just as students are coming into the classroom every day, it's the same expectation for our alternative pathways students. Learning online is not for everyone. For students who like to be online, like to watch videos, read online, respond to questions online, maybe record their voice for, responses to show their learning, writing, typing. So those are some of the basics. A student has to like to be online. The other thing that I feel is really important is that the student is going to be able to show up. So you have to get online. You have to do the work. You have to check in with Mr. Noggle. And we are using a program called Graduation Alliance, which has online classes, licensed teachers in the area, in the specialty area, and students can actually email and ask them questions. Mm-hmm. They can set up a Google Meet and go over something that's confusing. And that's where Mr. Noggle is kind of that in between. We have our student, we have our teacher connected to the class, and Mr. Noggle is checking in to make sure that students are making progress and communicating with the teacher as they need.
So there is expectations.
There are definite expectations.
Check-ins.
Yep.
And if the student doesn't engage and they're just not they're not turning in the work, and what would happen then?
Right. So this is going to happen really quickly, which will be different than in person to a degree. You miss 2 days and you're really, really behind. So whereas we do have the fully online portion, if a student is not keeping up, we will require that student to come into the Pathways classroom. Because sometimes a change of scenery can help.
Yeah.
We will have parent, guardian, and student meetings. And I like to think that we're going to make this work for everyone, but perhaps we learn that it doesn't work. And in that case, with our counselor, we would make the decision to return to in-person. Because again, this has to work for the student, and we want the student to be learning. It's not just going through the packets.
It's like being able to meet the kids where they're at, but we're also not giving them a free pass to graduation, which I love, because that's a really hard balance to do when you're talking about an online school. Like, how do you not just give them a free pass? Like you were saying, not just checking the boxes and signing them off, and then by the time they leave, they're not actually ready for the real world. So I love that we've become so advanced in our ability as educators to provide an opportunity like this and ensure that they're going to be successful when they get out there.
Well, I think we learned a lot from the pandemic too, right?
Yeah,
we were all online there for a while,
right?
and it didn't necessarily serve us all well. And some of us never want to be online again, and some of us really thrived. And I know my own son really thrived and really enjoyed online learning. And I know there are a lot of our students in Jefferson are in the same way. And perhaps, as parents, you're thinking, I know my kid and how they went through that pandemic, and they really thrived in that environment, and they feel more comfortable and more secure in that way. And so that might be a really good person for something like this. Conversely, we also know the students who really didn't do well, we couldn't motivate. They just didn't engage, and it was really, really difficult. And for them, we don't want to have them lose learning, and we want to set them up for success when they go out into the real world. And just having them disengage from school doesn't help them, right? That's not what this is about. It's not disengaging. It's engaging, but just in a different way. Yeah.
My daughter was interested in it at one time, and we were looking at it from the pandemic. But what I found was it seemed like there was all these fly-by-night online schools that just popped up from the pandemic, and most of them were rated so poorly academically. So hearing that there's something that has a solid foundation like this at Jefferson that gives those kids those opportunities sounds fantastic.
It does sound fantastic. And I'm really proud of this program because this pathway, because we haven't been able to offer this in this way. And there are kids who really have a need, that's not just the traditional coming in and sitting in class every day. And so now we're able to provide something we haven't been able to do in a while. I know that some of our students have left to go on to online charter schools. And now we have our own, really. So we can, come on back, folks, because we can, get the ADM, the money for your child being in our schools, but we can also, serve you locally, and your child can go to our sports and our events and graduate and walk across our stage here and be part of the Jefferson family and still have that online piece. So if your child is doing online charter, please consider coming back to us, because I think we would really, I think we can really offer something quite engaging and special.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's about wraps us up here. So, Laura, I want to thank you for putting all this program together and all the hard work that you've done. And I'm really excited for this year and how this takes shape. So, thank you so much for being here and joining us today. Becca, Chris, thank you again for co-hosting and supporting all this program. Everybody, thank you for joining JPod, and until next week, have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.